So like Maybong's definitely, I'd say, kind of like the highlight in the last few months. So our boat club, especially on the women's side and the men's side too, but the women's side, we've got a long-standing history of being quite high up in the ranking. So we started off ranked 5th this season, and we bumped up to 4th, which is pretty huge for us.
What's up, everybody? It's What's Out Media, and we're bringing back RowingCast. This is episode 10 of RowingCast. If you haven't already, make sure you check out the Ultra Racing Series 1 that happened on the 4th of July. Sadly, I lost my 2K to Lincoln. It was a shame. I lost by 0.1 splits. It's okay. I'll get them back some other time. We'll have Ultra Racing Series 2 in November, but this episode is not about Ultra Racing Series. This is a RowingCast podcast, and today we have my guest, Chinazo Okeke. How are you doing today?
Hi, yeah, I'm good. It's a nice sunny day for once in the UK finally, so a good day.
Sweet. So let's talk about your backstory. What were you like just growing up as an adolescent?
I think I was always quite sporty. I love sport. I played every sport under the sun. That was like my main thing after school: tennis, basketball, football, and any sport that was there to be played. I was playing it. I was also quite academic though. I kind of always knew I wanted to kind of grow up and have sport involved in my life, but I was also kind of very degree focused, so I wanted to kind of have a career and then do sport on the side. So I think I kind of did a little bit of everything, and I did so many sports. I really just didn't know what I wanted to fully commit to. But I'd say very energetic and sporty. Yeah, good summary.
Did you find a release? So, you could be very much academic based, but you kind of find some type of outlet right in the sport. So what was your favorite sport? I mean, if you had like multiple ones, what if you could name your top 3 sports that you participated growing up in?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're right about the whole like release thing. I think it was like very important for me, especially because I like always did quite well academically, but at the expense of a lot of stress. I always found sport as something that really helped me out a lot. I'd say my top sport was definitely tennis. That's the one I did the most and focused on. I played that for 5 years, from like year 7 to year 11 in the UK years. So that's basically through like middle school and high school for you guys. And I also did quite a lot of basketball. I'd say that's the next one on the list. And running, cross country and track. I'd say those were kind of my top 3 in no particular order.
Well, that's pretty sweet. Regardless, what type of lessons did you learn from tennis? And then what type of lessons did you learn from running in specific?
I think from tennis, I learned a lot about controlled power. So when I came in, I was very much someone who I just wanted to hit the ball as hard as I can and hope it went in. And I was like, the harder I hit the ball, the more chances I have of beating my opponent. And I very quickly learned that if you just whack the ball as hard as you can, it's not going in at all. And you kind of have to rein things back in, and you have to almost go back to like zero in terms of your power and really focus on your technique. And then you can start adding power into things. And I think it taught me to sort of, you have to almost get weaker before you get stronger, and that's okay. And that's not a sign of regression. It's like just a normal way to progress. And I think that's helped me out a lot later on in life and in other sports. And did you say running as well?
Yes.
Yeah, I think in running, the mental strength. I think running is definitely up there, one of the hardest sports I've done, especially running cross country. Like I don't think I'm a naturally born runner. I can't particularly say I enjoyed it. I was kind of pushed into it mainly because I stopped tennis because the place where I trained was becoming too far to travel to. So picked up track and cross country as a last resort of, okay, well, I can train this anywhere. And it was quite difficult at first because I was someone who like hated running. Like I liked running for a reason in the game, but running on its own was not for me. And it took a lot of mental resilience to kind of overcome certain sessions and be like, okay, well, I don't want to do this, but we're just going to get on with it and we're going to crack on because I have to do it. Again, something very much that helped me out in life, because sometimes I don't want to do certain things, just as life is. And it just taught me that it's still possible to get those things done, even if they don't feel great in the moment. Sometimes you just have to crack on with things. So yeah, I think those two are the main ones.
What were some big wins on the sports side, and what were some big wins on the, on the academic side for you?
Growing up, you mean, or just in general in my life?
Growing up. So right now in that like primary, before you go on to university, like what were some of those big accomplishments that kind of like got you to where you are?
Yeah, I'd say some of the big ones for me was when I did karate when I was younger. So I actually grew up in Ukraine. I lived there for the first few years of my life. And I focused a lot on karate before I kind of started my tennis and my running. And I'd say my kind of top achievement there was I was ranked second in my country. Partly because it was quite a young age category, so there weren't many people my age doing that sport. But I think that also kind of speaks for it, because it is kind of like a crazy thing to be doing, like aged quite young. I can't say I've had that many successes in my tennis nor my running career, which maybe partly is why I didn't enjoy them as much. But I think a lot of those things that I did achieve were quite important to me at the time, like winning like school meets and just like county championships, but nothing sort of beyond that. So I'd say karate is probably like the biggest thing that I achieved in my young age. Academically, like I said, I was always quite studious. My parents really wanted to make sure that I did well at school and got into a good university. Um, I ranked top in my school for grades at the end of our GCSEs, and I did pretty well in my A levels. I always wanted to go to medical school, so that's kind of something that was always at the forefront of my mind. So I tried really hard at school to make sure that I got into that, and it all worked out. So yeah.
Yeah, and even on the sports side, when I talk about a win that doesn't necessarily have to be like I won a championship or I was, a win means something that just helped you, along the way. Was there any moment where it was like maybe you learned something about yourself? I feel like in running, every time I hear like from a cross country runner or even, some sprinters that I know, was like that's when they really like find like they really are testing themselves to an extent that they don't even know. And I can feel that in rowing as well. So, a win is a measurable that like everyone has like a different, idea of it. But I totally get that. That's pretty amazing. So on the academic side, it's like, med school's the goal. You got to go hard for it. So without a doubt, that's pretty great. Let's talk about, what is the process to get into university on the other side of the pond? I have no idea.
Yeah, so here, so we basically go through middle school and high school as one. We call it secondary school. So you start age 13, you finish age 18. And for us, it's kind of broken up into secondary school, where that's 13 to 16, and then sixth form, 16 to 18. And 13 to 16, you're working towards something called GCSEs, which is, don't know what it stands for, but that's like everyone's expected to do it. Those are just like the generalized qualifications. Like if you go to school, you're doing your GCSEs. And there you get such a wide variety of subjects to pick from. I mean, everyone has to do the basics, maths, English, science. So in schools like mine, also religious studies was compulsory too. But you pick around like 9 to 10 subjects and you kind of focus on those. And then you get assessed at the end of year 11. There's just one big assessment. I know you guys kind of have you have a GPA and you do like assessments to contribute towards that. Yeah, we don't have that. For us, it's one set of exams that we sit, and that is it. And that kind of determines your future, which is quite scary when everything, like if you have a bad day, you have a bad day, and like there's not very much you can do about it afterwards. So yeah, you sit your GCSEs at 16, and then after that, if you do well enough in your GCSEs, it's usually like an average of like a D or a C for most subjects. You then go on to your A levels. You can go straight into work after your GCSEs, but if you want to get to university, and especially like degrees like maths or engineering, or English, things like that, they'll require you to sit your A levels, which is what I did. And there you pick 3 to 4. Some people do 5. I've heard of people do a lot more than that, but usually 3 to 4 subjects that you really specialize in. So I applied to med school in Cambridge, and they have certain requirements for different schools and different subjects. So I wanted to do medicine. The only requirement for me was that I had to do chemistry and one other science. So I went with biology, chemistry, and maths. So that's what I did in my A levels. And then with those A levels, you can then apply to university. But they also look at your GCSE first. So the A levels go across 2 years. And after you finish your first year of your A levels, that's when you start applying to universities with your GCSEs, and then what we call like predicted grades that you get from your teachers, where they say, this is what I think the student will get in their second year of sixth form, like for their A levels. And then you get university offers based on that. There's also certain entrance exams that you can sit as well, as I'm sure it's similar to the States. Like for med school, I had to sit like a separate entrance exam. And then, you get an offer where you have to meet a certain grade requirement, usually. Sometimes you get an unconditional offer where they'll take you no matter what you get in your A levels, but that's quite rare. So, you get a certain grade requirement, and if you meet it by the end of your second year of sixth form, then you get into uni.
So those last 2 years of like secondary school, they're kind of they're heavily focused in certain areas. That's pretty neat.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. So getting to Cambridge, what does that look like?
Hard, very, very hard. I'd say it's definitely one of those things where if that's one of your goals, it is the one thing that you kind of focus on, and you have to just dedicate like those 2 years during sixth form and maybe like a few years before that, just really grinding, and having that as your sole goal in mind. And I think for me, I think at that point you're not really developed in sort of the way you approach learning and the way you kind of develop academically. So what that looked like for me is just really going overkill, and that's when I kind of quit a lot of my sports because I felt like I couldn't juggle the two, because I just didn't know how. I think it very much was possible to juggle the two, but I kind of just shut down, and I just thought, oh, this is my one shot at this. I need to just focus everything on that, and definitely went about it in an overkilled kind of fashion. But it was definitely a lot of hard work. And I think sometimes a lot of luck. I think it very much matters who you come across in your kind of preparation for interviews and your admissions courses. Like sometimes you're lucky and you come across people who very much know what they're talking about, and they'll kind of help you get in. Other times you come across people who there's a lot of like admissions courses that you can go on and like interview courses that you can go on. And sometimes you'll just come across people who just want your money and aren't really out there to help you. So I think a lot of it is kind of, yes, luck, but also very much hard work. And not everyone makes it first time. I know a lot of my friends who applied and didn't get in first time and then reapplied. So it's a very competitive pool of people. And you kind of have to be on par to match that. But one thing that I do very much like about Cambridge is they do care about you as like an overall person. And I think it's not just about the academic side. Like having done all those sporting things and all the other extracurriculars that I did leading up to then helped me so much, especially during my interview. For example, like I said, I did a lot of cross country, so I got really interested in altitude training. And it turned out that the professor that was interviewing me for my place in medicine actually did a lot of research on altitude training. And it just so happened that we had that in common to talk about. And I think he really liked that, because most people come in there and all they talk is medicine. Most Cambridge kind of look at you and they're like, okay, well, who are you as an individual? What else is there to you? And I think that really helped me, even though I didn't kind of realize it at the time. It was good that I had all these like extracurriculars behind me. And I think that's what then helped me to realize that, okay, like it's fine to be a well-rounded individual. I don't need to just focus on just one thing. It's okay to have other hobbies and commitments. So yeah, it was hard, but I think very much eye-opening in like a very positive way.
I think that hyper focusedness, you need that at times. So, you were just getting adjusted to everything. How long was that adjustment period? And then what was your first steps, trying out a hobby at Cambridge?
Yeah, so I think the first year for me was 2020, which was quite difficult because it was like lockdown. Nobody could go anywhere. You couldn't socialize. We got put in like student housing, like the equivalent of dorms for you guys. And the only people we could socialize with, we got given like little groups of the people that we lived close to, and that was it. And you couldn't really socialize beyond that. There were a few clubs up and running, but very much clubs that could practice outside or do things outside. And for me, when I went into Cambridge, I was still the only sport that I actually did keep up was running, like cross country and track. And luckily, that's like an outdoor activity. So the cross country and track club in Cambridge was still running. And I remember I think I saw an Instagram post from them, from the club. And I reached out to the captain of the club and I said, hey, like I'm Chinazo, like I'm an incoming fresher. I'd love to try out for your team. Like I'd love to just join in. And I remember that they organized like a session for everyone to try out at the start. And everyone met in this park and everyone convened. And then they were like, okay, well, let's just go for a run in the chat. And I remember getting absolutely dropped in that run, like so badly. Like they had all just like ran off, and I was like, not only is this a new city that I don't know, I've just been dropped in the middle of nowhere. Like I just about have my phone. I'm not yet connected to the Wi-Fi. Like I have no clue of how to get back. And luckily, one of the girls kind of ran back and found me and was like, "I'm so sorry." Like it was such a big group. It was so difficult to like notice when someone got dropped. So then she just like slowly jogged along with me, and then like we had a really nice chat, and it was great. We're friends now, and that girl actually ended up going to the Olympics, so to run the 800. So it was great. But I just remember being like, oh my goodness, I am so out of my depth here. Like this is like the standard here is insane. But then I still carried on like showing up, and like that girl made me feel so welcome that I was like, okay, like this is fine. Yeah, I just remember like just showing up to the sessions, and it was something that just kept my social life going at the time because that was like the only thing I was able to do other than socialize with the people I lived with. So it was a bit rough, and the only thing I really had to do was just run and then sit in my room and study, and then maybe see a few friends for dinner that I lived with. But yeah, we kind of went from like absolutely like 0 to 100 straight away in that run, and but it's still like one of the funniest memories I think I have.
That's pretty solid, and it shows a lot of character for the runner to come back to you, and Olympian status there to come back and be like, hey, sorry, the pack, we get lost. It's okay, it's okay. So
Exactly.
interesting. Um, let's talk about it, man. So what was running at the university like, just overall? What were some of your favorite experiences? I mean, I feel like that first story right there just shows, but at least you gave it in the States, we call it the good old college try, right? So really good work. So what went on there? How did that go?
Yeah, so the way the running team kind of works is anyone can kind of join the cross country team, and you can train with the team as much as you want. And the way selection works is we have these events called varsity, which is, I think, it's different to what you guys would call varsity. For us, it's Cambridge versus Oxford. Sometime either for track, it will be in the summer, and then indoor in March, and then for cross country, it's always sometime in December. And you basically, the whole point of the season is to aim to be kind of selected for that, and then compete against Oxford, because that is the big thing that Cambridge cares about. And you sort of train with cross country. It's a bit difficult because we start the year in October here in Cambridge, and we have like 8-week terms. So you basically have around 8 weeks to try out for the team through like various different competitions. There's different like 5Ks and 10Ks that they organize. So you're basically like just turning up to those, and you're hoping to be like in the top think it's top 4 athletes that get picked for the first team, and then the next 4 get picked for the second team, and then the third team. But the great thing about it is, I think especially in cross country, you have something called the mob match, which basically is meant to sound quite chaotic, but it's just everyone who didn't get picked for the first, second, or third team still gets to race against Oxford, and that still contributes to points, which I think is quite nice, and it keeps people coming back and keeps the inclusivity, and it means that you can still participate in the sport even if you don't dedicate all of your time to it and you just go there for a bit of fun. With track, it kind of mainly starts picking back up around like January time to get ready for the indoor season. So I would usually, because I did cross country and the 800, I'd usually start transitioning into like 800 training around sort of December time. So then kind of like by the time the indoor season rolled around, I was kind of ready. A selection for that worked in a similar way. There's the various indoor competitions that they organize. We don't have an indoor track here in Cambridge, so we'd usually like travel to London to, I think it's called Lee Valley, and we'd have various competitions there throughout the year. And then post-March, it's indoor season is over, and then it's outdoor season. I think that's like everyone's favorite. And as much as I enjoy cross country to a certain extent, track has always been my favorite. So I always just look forward to that time in like March or April where we stop doing like horrifically long runs and it's all like speed work focused for the 800. I had an incredible time on the Cambridge running team. Like the squad there is just so supportive and inclusive, no matter of like your abilities or your time commitments. And I think in a place like Cambridge, it's very understandable that loads of people have so little time because of their degree, that they really do accommodate your training hours for you. I think sport in the UK, especially at universities, it's not done in the same way that like American sport is. Because I think in America, if you go to college for a sport, that's almost like your career, and then you also do your degree on the side. Whereas here is very much degree orientated, and then it's like, okay, well, you can do your sport around that. That doesn't mean that there isn't any space for you to go beyond that. Like we've had like so many Olympians produced at this university and so many people that have gone on to be like so incredibly talented at that sport, but that is for us quite rare. So for me, what was important to have from track is kind of like an outlet for my stress from studying, but also have like a social space and like have a great community, and that's exactly what the club provided for me. So I had a great time.
Yeah, and like even post-pandemic, just to sidetrack off in the States, what's big now is running clubs. It's just something that like gets you outside, gets you around people, and actually like, just running in general is better than just, rotting inside and not doing anything. So that's pretty solid. How did you get into rowing? The whole thing is RowingCast. How'd you get into rowing?
Yeah, so it was actually quite a funny one. So for us, the way that our system kind of works is each college in Cambridge, I believe there's 32. It'll be very embarrassing if I'm wrong about how many colleges there are at my university, but I believe there are 32. And each one more or less has their own boat club. And it's such a big traditional thing in Cambridge that every college goes into rowing. Like rowing is like the biggest sport I'd say that there is in Cambridge, especially in terms of investment and organization. So every single college will have a boat club, and if you want to learn to row, you can go novice at your boat club. And then we also have the overarching Cambridge University Boat Club, which is the one that then you see on the TV competing against Oxford. So everyone from the college boat clubs who is like good enough will then go on to Cambridge University Boat Club. Or if you come in already knowing how to row, we just go straight to Cambridge University Boat Club and try out for their team there. So I had no previous rowing experiences. Like nowhere where I grew up was already a river or like anywhere close by. Nor had I even ever like considered rowing as a sport before. But then I got to Cambridge and all my friends were doing it. Every single person that I was friends with in my friendship group did rowing, and there was about like 8 of us. So I was very much the odd one out. And I think that's the thing that put me off of it at first, is because I was like, well, I run, I have my own thing. it just sounds like everyone's just jumping on this bandwagon of rowing because it's a Cambridge thing. Like, I'm never doing this sport ever in my life. And I'd always like joke with my friends. I'm like, I don't know why you row. Like, running is just so much better. Like, come join the row club. And then finally in second year, the start of my second year, they convinced me to try out rowing. And I remember I showed up to the boathouse for the barbecue because they tried to convince everyone. They said, oh, if you come try out rowing, there's a free barbecue. And I was like, well, yeah, sign me up, free food. I will definitely be there. Went for the barbecue, and then they were like, okay, like now time to get in a boat. And I was like, I'm terrified of deep water. That boat looked so unstable. Like, it was an eight full of people that have never touched an oar before in their lives. That boat was the most like unstable, unsat thing that I'd ever like been in, and I was like terrified. And I don't think I'd ever experienced like a less cohesive crew in my life. Like, it was just like, it was something else. And I remember just being in that outing, sitting there thinking, I don't feel like I'm exercising. I don't know what I'm getting out of this. I am just terrified because I feel like the boat's going to tip. I'm never coming back. And I got off the water, and all of that second year, I was just, that just made me more adamant that I never wanted to do rowing. And then at the end of my second year, I ended up getting injured from running. So I had a recurring like sciatica issue, and there were times where my back would just go and I just couldn't run. And that happened for like right before my exam. So I just took like 3 months off, or like 2 months off. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll let it finally recover, let it settle down. And after my exams, I actually flew out to the States, to Boston, for an internship with a few of my friends. And the first thing I did was find a track. And I was like, well, time for a hard track session, because, you know, what better way to come back from an injury than to go do a sprint session on the track? Very, very, very stupid thing to do. And I remember it was coming to the end of my session. Everything was actually going well. And then I remember on the last rep, I started running, and I just felt my knee completely go. And I just knew that I'd like torn something. But I was hobbling about. I couldn't walk. I remember like hobbling back to my dorm and going to my friends, and I was like, I've definitely messed up here. Like, I can't walk. And then for the next week, I was just kind of like limping about, hobbling about. And I thought, that's like, it's just funny that I've gone from one injury to another. But one thing that I could do in the gym for some reason was squat. So I decided, I was like, okay, well, erging seems kind of similar. So like, let me just try sitting on the erg. And this is like around like June, July. And the two friends that I was with doing the internship with me, one of them was a lower boats captain at my boat club, which is basically someone who coaches kind of like the third and fourth boats in the boat club. And the other girl had rowed all the way through school. So they were like, okay, like, let's get your knee rehabbed. Like, let's get you on an erg. And like, you know, that could be a good way to keep your fitness up before you return into running. And I remember the first session that I did on the erg with my friend, Izzy. And I just sat there and I was like, this is just so much fun. And I remember we'd go to the gym like every morning before our internship started, and she would like give me like coaching tips, like arms, body, legs, body, arms, body, legs. And I was like, oh my God, this is great. I also just at this point was stopped. Like, my love for running just kind of faded. Like, I think I was just doing it out of, okay, well, this is a sport I'm doing, so I'm just going to do it, rather than because I necessarily enjoyed it. And I just fell in love with rowing on the erg, which I don't think many people probably would say, but I just loved erging. And then I came back at the start of my third year in September, and I went to my college boat club, and I was like, hi, me again. I know I said I'd never come back, but, you know, here I am. And I sat on the erg a lot with the coach before, because our term starts in October, before our term started. And I remember my erging just got better and better. And he was like, okay, well, you've been on the erg for so long, like, I don't see a point of you like taking a whole term to novice, so why don't you just hop straight into our first boat? And I was like, wow, okay, this is quite a big step, but okay, sure. And then I remember rocking up to my first outing. Obviously, everyone there knew how to row and rowed pretty well. And I remember I was just sat there like, I don't even know how to feather a blade. But the coach and everyone else around me was so patient with me. I remember we had to row square blades for the first few weeks of the outings, literally alternating 6 square blades and 8 square blades because I just couldn't get my head around feathering. And finally, maybe like 2 weeks in, finally learned to feather. Kind of had the sequence semi decently that I wasn't like too disruptive to the crew. And then it all kind of kicked off from there.
That's pretty sweet. So you almost fell for the good old college. Like usually it's some type of food, barbecue, pizza in the States or something like that. Come try out rowing. And you
Yeah.
said no. Running, you were very stubborn. Running was the sport. And it so happened that you ended up having an internship and like the most like rowing, like central like city in the United States, Boston. So pretty cool. Also, yes, most people wouldn't say erging is like necessarily fun, but rowing with friends, like, or erging with friends is a whole different story. So, if you
Yeah.
have company and you have a little like, you have a little routine, it'll help you get into it. You'll have some fun. So that's pretty sweet. So let's talk about that just growing stage. He goes from, oh yeah, you don't need to be a novice. Let's just put you in this boat. What, you're on the square for a few weeks, then you finally learn how to feather. I always tell this embarrassing story. When I was learning how to row, I caught a crab, just having my blade rest, right? Like it was pretty goofy. So, it happens to everybody. So everyone has that story. Or, everyone's story is different, but everyone has that story.
Yeah.
What was like some of those getting into the sport? What were your initial thoughts when you were in the boat?
Yeah, I think I was pleasantly surprised because my like experience before that of kind of novicing was an unsat boat. I remember coming back and I was just clinging onto my back because I'd already had like a back injury before we were running. And I just remember being like, oh my goodness me, if this is what it is like every single session, absolutely not. But I remember I was just so surprised. I was like, this is actually kind of fun. I understand why people wake up at like 5:30 in the morning to do this. I was like, I had never seen the sunrise before properly in my life. Like, I don't think ever, because I am such like a night owl. Like, I will sleep until like 10 a.m., 11 a.m., like go to bed at like 2 or 3. So it was quite a shift in my schedule. I remember that was like the most like shocking thing to me. I it took a lot of adjusting, getting myself into bed at like 9 or 10 to make sure I got enough sleep. And I definitely learned that the like hard way. Like I was still going to bed at like 2 when I first started, and then waking up at like 5 or 6, and I just was not getting any sleep, and I was like napping throughout the day. So I really had to like adjust my sleep schedule. And I just remember thinking like this is such a disciplined lifestyle to live. Like this has actually helped me to like balance my time. Like all of a sudden I have a whole morning free where I've already exercised. I got to see my friends, like I'm in a good mood, like we had so much fun, and now I've got like a whole day to like do more work and then have another session in the evening. And I just thought, wow, this is like so much more organized because I remember with running, unless you kind of plan to run with people, you can just do your sessions on your own whenever you liked for most of the week. And I definitely would like, I'd leave my first session until like 1 p.m. and like train like 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. And then by that time, I'm like, okay, well, I now need to do like my second session. So I'd end up doing that from like 5 to 7. And it just took like up my entire day because I just didn't time manage it well. I think my first thoughts were like, wow, like this is like helping me live such like an organized life. Like it's great. I'm having so much fun. I'm like with my friends. Um, and this is actually going okay. Like I remember being frustrated a lot because I think it was quite difficult going from kind of just learning to row almost and just being thrown into the first boat. Like I felt a lot of pressure the entire time because I thought, okay, well, anything goes wrong, anything the coach says to the whole crew, well, that must be me because I'm the person here who doesn't know how to row. And it took a lot of overcoming, a lot of self doubt. And I remember there were some sessions I came back from and I just felt like so bad. I was just thinking like, why am I in this boat? Like I'm clearly like disrupting the crew. And I think a lot of it, like, yes, partly maybe, but I think a lot of it was just in my head and just a lot of insecurity. And I think throughout the kind of initial term, I learned a lot about sort of trusting the coach and kind of trusting myself and kind of believing, okay, like I'm here for a reason. Like they wouldn't have just put me in here if they thought that I, you know, like shouldn't have been there. And yeah, I had a great time.
So, what was your friends' reactions, right? So, you said a lot of your friends, your friend group, they're rowers. You were that one runner. Then you start taking on the sport. What are their reaction to it? Are they hype?
Yeah, I think they absolutely loved it. They remember, like, I remember when I came back from my internship and I called one of them up and I was like, guess who's going to be rowing? And they just didn't believe me. They were like, there's absolutely no way. Because I can't explain to you how adamant I was that I would never, especially after my second year, like trying out novicing, like they thought I would never step foot in the boathouse again. And then I just showed up to like in like September because I came back to university early, showed up in September and just sat on the erg. And they were there and they were just like, I just don't believe that this is like you rowing. But they absolutely loved it because they were in the boat club as well. And all four of us ended up in like the first boat for that term. So we were all rowing together and it was just like so much fun. So I think that they loved it.
And that makes it even more sweet, right? So, and I bet you too, since you had your friends there, they showed you a little bit more grace than they would if it was some other person that just added in and was learn. Sometimes you're like, okay, this person, has everything, but like I'm not willing to give up the time to train to but for them to have that like that patience is amazing and it shows, what type of training and development you guys have there. So what does that first year look like for you? Any great races? Did you race at all? Like what does that look like? And then, you know, let's talk a little bit later on or after you answer that question, we'll talk a little bit about the erg.
Yeah, so the first year was we did a lot of races. So there's a lot of intercollegiate races that you do throughout the whole year. I think my most memorable one would have to be it was sort of the next term after that, and we were rowing up to the start line. And this was quite a big race. It was just like the whole stretch of the river. Our river in Cambridge is like very windy, very bendy, very much reliant on the cocks to like steer well. And I think the races there like are about like the one that we did just over 2K in total. And I remember this was like the first sort of like short race that we did. We were entering like a more sprinting season because the first time we race like a 5K race, so it's a bit more like endurance based. Whereas this was like one of the first races that we did that was like quite a short, sprinty kind of 2K based race, and like I still had the same mindset that I had when I was running, that I loved sprinting, and I like the shorter the length of time that I get to do the activity for, like the better. And I remember we were like rowing up to the start line, and I remember I caught like the biggest crab I'd ever caught in my life, and the oar bent round so much around the side of the boat. And then everyone else was still rowing because I sat like right at the back. I think I was like in bow three, and I don't think anyone noticed. So I thought, okay, well, the best thing to do would be to like sit up with the blade and like push it through the water and like try and recover this crab. And I remember I started doing that, and I like sat up so hard with this blade that it ended up twisting around the rigger even more and just snapping in half. So we're rowing up to the race, and we were like 4K away from the boathouse, and my blade has just snapped. And I'm just sat there like, what have I just done? And I remember looking over at like our coach, and he was just laughing, like he was just finding the whole thing quite funny. So then we had to like, while there's so many boats like trying to row up, like it was so chaotic, we like pull into the bank. I like take out this like broken blade that's like in like fully in half, like hanging on by like a few carbon fibers at this point. I pull it out, I give it to him, and he then cycles all the way back to the boathouse, finds another blade, and then cycles with the blade like 7K upstream, like to bring it to me to the start line. And like he just got there in time. Like I remember being sat there thinking like there's no way he's gonna make it along this like really narrow tow path that is muddy and bumpy with a blade while there's so many other coaches there. But he he was like speedy. He was on a mission, and he somehow made it. We then like pulled in again from marshalling, got the blade in, and finally had a blade. And I think I think everyone found it funny. Like at first, I was just so stressed. I was like, I've just broken a blade. This is like 300, 400 pounds of equipment. But everyone was just finding it funny, and it was hilarious. And there's so many photos of us that like the photographers took of us like rowing up to the start line with like a whole oar missing, and the poor girl in like 4 or 2 like was just sitting the boat by herself for me because like I just didn't have an oar. So that was quite funny. And then the kind of like other big races that we have are something called the bumps races, which I think is like such a unique thing to like Cambridge and Oxford, whereby all the boats are kind of lined up along the river in a particular order, and that order like carries on year, and then we race for 4 days, and you race across like 2.7k, and the aim is to bump the boat in front of you, like quite literally, like you need physical contact for it to count as a bump. And the way it works is there's a cannon that goes off, and everyone just starts rowing. And then yeah, the aim is basically to go off as hard as you can and just hope to catch the boat in front, and then also hope that the boat behind you doesn't catch you when you then like ultimately blow up and don't catch the boat in front of you. And it is just like the most chaotic set of racing. Like the photos you get from there is like boats like absolutely mounting banks because the river cam is just so twisty and turny, and like the cox has to be like so on it with all the corners that sometimes you take a corner too tight and like you're straight into the bank. So many pictures of like crews crashing because you know when you're like gaining on a crew and like your cox is like, yeah, keep going, but the crew in front of you just don't like, they don't want to concede, so sometimes you will end up just like absolutely crashing into their stern before they end up conceding. And there's like so much chaos that goes on, and then like if you bump during the race, there's like so many other boats behind you, so you have to like clear and like move out the way so the other boats can row through. And there's just certain times where like just boats just don't clear properly because you know there's so many people on the bank, so many coaches all shouting at you where you go, and sometimes you just the coach just doesn't clear properly, and then they end up getting rammed by like a crew behind them. And then people appeal, people fine, they'll like find every excuse to like blame someone for why they didn't bump the boat in front, and the college rivalry like really comes out. Like there's so many people on the bank every single day, and for the competition and like our very last term, what we call like May's bumps, because it's in like it takes place in June, but it's in our May term. That's the one that everyone comes out for because that's all the big ones. Like all the alumni come in to watch, and the bank is just absolutely full of so many spectators all across this 2.7k course, and it is so incredible to just row through, and like everyone supports everyone. Like yeah, if you're like chasing their college, they'll obviously cheer for their college, but otherwise like everyone is cheering for you, and it's just such an incredible atmosphere. And I've done like quite a few races, and I think those are definitely like my favorite ones because you never know what's going to happen, and it's quite an unfair race. Like the fastest crew won't necessarily be the one that's like at the head of the river and starts first. You also might not catch the crew in front of you despite being faster because all of a sudden you have to be 1.5 lengths faster than the crew instead of like in a regatta race where even if you win by like 100th of a second, you still win. So I think it's just such a fun and unpredictable set of races, and like I absolutely love it.
Well, that's very unique, and now I kind of get, English rowers now. So, especially when it comes to like sprinting or, they seem very punchy and they just seem like, in a lot of ways, especially if you look at like the Henley Row Regatta, right? When they face American teams, and this is no like, no shot to America, but when you're battling right next to each other, after a while, like you kind of lose that mental battle. But it seems like a lot of like the English crews are very punchy with it, and they keep going. So that's a very interesting concept, and that's called bumps. Those are called bumps.
Yeah, bumps. Yeah.
Pretty sweet, pretty sweet. So, so that's your first year, right? The oar story. That's just common, right? Novice, right? Chaos,
Yeah.
right? So
classic 3-seat novice.
well, at least you got on with it. So what does that look like after that? And then, oh, this is the part that we're going to talk about. So erging seems to be the gateway that got you into the sport. And then, you know, erging seems, just based off of what I'm seeing, is like erging is like a thing for you. You've got a world record, right? How do I describe this? How would you describe it?
Yeah, so so I kind of finished so I started running in my third year. So I finished my third year with the college. And then I decided to try out for the uni team. And the thing with trying out for the uni team is such like an incredible thing to get to do the boat race. Like, it is such a public televised thing, and the training is incredible for it, and the facilities that we get to use are absolutely incredible. However, it is quite a like big time commitment. You go from in college where, you know, the most you'll be training is like 9 times a week, to all of a sudden row with the Cambridge Uni Club, where you're training out in Ely. So you have to, you know, get up even earlier to like get to Ely, train there about 12 times a week. Most of your weekend is like double sessions, so that's completely like taken up by that. And there's a lot that goes into it in terms of, you know, being mentally ready, going to certain talks, and it all of a sudden becomes like quite an intense time commitment, because it's just such a big and important race. So I tried out for the uni team, and unfortunately for me, it didn't work out with my placement. So it comes around to like December, and things are just, I'm placed about a 2-hour commute from Cambridge. So I'm going to Ely in the morning, coming back to Cambridge, commuting for 2 hours to my placement for medical school, spending like 5-6 hours there, commuting 2 hours back, trying to train again. And usually the session in the evening sometimes is like quite big, like an erg test or something like quite intense. And then literally about half an hour for dinner and straight to bed. And that was my life for like 3-4 months. And I think it got to a point where I realized like I couldn't balance it. Like some people in medical school get placed a lot closer, and it makes it a lot easier to balance. But for me, I just got quite unlucky with my placements, and it just didn't work out. And then I remember I was very upset, because this like meant so much to me, and I absolutely loved the team, and the environment there is absolutely incredible. Like, I loved running and I loved college rowing, but nothing will ever compare to the environment that I experienced at the Cambridge Boat Club. It was incredible. So when I realized that like it just wasn't want to work out, I was quite bummed out. And I remember speaking to one of the welfare officers, and she was like, "Okay, well, you really like erging, and you know you're like quite strong in the gym, like you lift a lot of weights. Like, why don't you try out like going like just erging, so you can keep your fitness up, so maybe you can like trial again next year, and then, you know, seeing what you can do." And she was actually a lightweight who had just like finished her career at CUBC, and is kind of moving on to London rowing clubs. And she said, like, when I like left, I remember looking at RP3 like lightweight records, and I thought, like, why don't I just give some of them a shot? And she's like, "Okay, well, I've seen you on the erg. Why don't you just, you know, like try that out on the RP3, and then like see if you can break some records? Like, it could be like a fun thing to do, rather than just, you know, aimlessly erging every single day for the next 8 months." And I thought, do you know what? Sounds like a great idea. I've got nothing better to do. So I remember my New Year's resolution was to basically attempt some Rp3 World Records. So we had this conversation in like December, and I thought, okay, I'll give myself 1st of January like off to organize my life. And on the 2nd of January, I'm going to attempt the 500-meter Rp3 record that they had. And the way that they are like records work is they have like an under 23 record, and then like an overall kind of age category record. So I remember looking at the under 23 record, and I was like, do you know what? Like, I think I could get that. So let me just train up. Let me do like a few like sessions on the Rp3, learn to sprint, learn to rate high on one of these. Because Rp3s are a lot harder technically to row than I think than a concept two. Because if your tech's not good, you're like not going anywhere. So it took like a few weeks to get used to the Rp3. On the 2nd of January, me and a few friends showed up, and I was like, okay, like, let's do it. And yeah, I got on the erg and just like absolutely went for it. Like, I had absolutely no concept at some point that like what split I was going at. I was just going for it. I was like, the harder I go, like the better time I'll get. And my two friends that showed up, they were absolutely great. Like I trialed with them that year, and they were just there, filming it so then we can like send it in for submission, like coaxing me along. And I remember I finished it, and I looked at the time, and it was like 1:30, and I was like, wait, that's like the overall record at that time was a 1:31, and I was like, wait, I didn't just break the under 23 record, like I broke the overall one, and I was so shocked because I just didn't expect it at all. So that was the first record that I broke. And then it all kind of just snowballed from there. I thought, okay, well, if I can get the 500, let me then go for like the other ones. So then I went for the 100 meter record as well, which I got. I then went for the 1 minute record as well, which I got. And then the next one I attempted after a bit more training, I think I did it around April, I believe, was the 1,000 meter record. I think that was probably the hardest one to get because I was like, 500 meters is a sprint. 1,000 meters is also a sprint, but for like double the distance. And I remember I ended up having to do it a total of 4 times. So the first 2 times that I did it was I had a specific day set out in mind. Like all my training leading up to it was like, I like programmed it for myself, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna taper it this week so that I'm ready to do it on this day. And I like set everything up. I had one of my friends who's a cox come in and cox me through it. And I remember I was like, well, the overall record at the moment just seems quite a lot and unattainable. So let's go for the U23 record. And I was like, I think like I've got that one in the bag. And I remember showing up, I got on the erg, I did it, got the U23 record, and I was only 1.5 seconds off the overall record. And I was so happy with myself. I was like, okay, well, this is looking pretty good. Means that I can, attempt the like overall record in a few like months or something. And then I remember getting off the erg, and I just kind of chilled for a bit. I was just happy. I was like, okay, like another record broken. And then I cycled into my college because I was like, I need food. I'm going for dinner. And then I was like, let me just double check on my phone to make sure this is saved. And I get to college, I look at my phone, I'm like, why is there nothing here? Like, there's no workout listed. And I started panicking. I was like, no, like I fully just killed myself on this erg. Like, surely it's saved on the erg. So I remember like I left, I didn't even touch my food. I just left it. I got up, cycled straight to the boathouse, found the like RP3 screen, and there was just nothing there. And I was like, I don't know what crashed, like I don't know what glitched, but it was just like completely gone. And I don't really know what came over me, but I was so upset and I was so sad that I went upstairs to the locker room. I put on my uni suit. I didn't warm up. I didn't do anything. I just sat on this erg again, and I just ripped another 1K. And I think I ended up going like half a second faster as well that time. Made sure it saved, and it was like, okay, great. I remember I have never felt more awful after an erg. Like I fell off that erg. I lay there like face down next to a bin because I felt so sick, and I was like, I was so happy. I think that was probably like one of the hardest things I think I've ever done. But yeah, I was just so happy. I was like, I can't believe that, it all worked out, because I was so upset when I first realized. And that then prepared me very well for when I attempted the 1K overall record, which is like my kind of fifth and final record that I have. I get quite a lot of mental block with ergs, funnily enough. As much as I love doing it, as soon as I get on there, even if I know I can do the time, sometimes it's just, I find it so difficult. So I remember I came to do my 1K overall. I sat on the erg and I was like, okay, had my friends coxing again. And I was like, okay, like I've got this. And I remember one thing that I forgot to do is on the screen, you can like, the RP3 is just so like advanced. There's so many stats you can have on the screen. And I managed to forget to put on the like average split stat. So like all I had on the screen was like my current split. And I had like the split I wanted to sit on, like a 136. I had that in my head. And I was like, well, I just have to stay on this. And I remember starting the erg, and I was sat at like a 125 for a bit, and then like a 128, and then I settled on a 136. And then with like 300 meters to go, I remember that number started to go up to like a 137, and then a 138. And something in my head just went, okay, well, you've lost it now. Like, this isn't a 136. Having forgotten that I didn't have the average split up, it was just the current split. So I just stopped. I was like, okay, well, there's no point carrying on. And I remember turning around to my friend and was like, well, this didn't go well. And she was like, why did you stop? And I was like, well, because the split's gone up. And she's like, no, that's like your like current split. It's not your average split. And like, it was at that point that I knew I'd like screwed up again. Again, I was like, this is just like, of course, it'll happen to me, like with the 1K. Like this is just like a standard procedure now. So at this point, I was like, well, there's no way I'm going to do it again today, because that's ridiculous. So I got off the erg, and then I went for a walk. And I don't know what happened, but I was like, do you know what? I've done it twice in one day before. Why don't we do it twice in one day again? Got back on the erg, made sure I actually had the average split this time, and just did it again, like half an hour later. Yeah, I think a lot of it for me has to probably do with the fact that the second time I do an erg, I have a lot less anxiety going into it, because I'm like, okay, well, if it doesn't work out this time, it's because I've literally just done a similar erg completely flat out beforehand. So it could be that, but yeah, that's my entertaining stories of how the 1K records were like a bit more of a ambitious stretch to get.
That's pretty sweet. So this period was what, from January to April or March?
Yeah, January to I think my latest one was in May, I believe. Yeah, January to May.
That's very sweet. And yeah, there's a point in training when you don't have that stress that you put on in the initial one. That, I don't know, you just kind of go for it in a different way, and it's more freeing. And then you're like, oh damn, like I put way too much weight on this for some reason after it's done. But that's after it's done. So I think that's for everybody. But that's an interesting story. It reminds me when I was young, the first time I ever broke 7, which is a big deal for high school, male rowers. I broke it after a full workout. So my coach was like, okay, we're going to paddle like a 2K to end practice. And my buddy, one of my best friends, had already broke 7 maybe a week prior. And I've been trying to like beat him, right? So I was like, hey, Max, that's his name. Max. He's like, what's up, X? What you need? I was like, dude, I think I'm going to just go for this 2K right now. And he's like, on the cool down? And I was like, yeah, we had done like a full like steady state workout, like 90 minutes. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I just kind of feel it. And he's like, feel it? And I was like, yeah, dude. So I started going and I did it. And I was like so hyped. All my friends nearby like hyping me up. You're like, hell yeah, X. And then my coach goes like, I didn't tell you to do that. And he's like, that doesn't count. So like,
oh no, I would have been heartbroken. Oh, that is savage.
But hey, I mean, I wasn't following, directions, but there was just that, like, when there's no pressure there, there's a different feeling with it. So that's amazing. And props to you, like, get your life together January 1st and then January 2nd, training for it, going for it. That's amazing. So after all of that, like, what can you get out of those, world records that can translate for like med school for you?
I think for me, kind of the big one was just, I think there's kind of two things. Like the first one is just go for things. Because when my friend first told me, I thought, okay, well, there's no way that I could ever break a world record. Like, there's absolutely no way. Like, you're joking. But then I was like, do you know what? There is no harm in just going for things, and just going for it. And I think in med school, a lot of the time, especially now with, so we have like a 6-year degree, and our first 3 years are very much just lecture based, and then the next 3 years are clinical. And I've just finished my 4th year, so it's very much being on the wards in the hospital, like shadowing doctors. And it's very scary the first time you just enter a hospital and someone asks you to do something. Like, we have to get certain skills signed off throughout the year, and there's some big ones like taking blood from someone, or like putting a catheter in someone or cannula. And it's so scary doing that for the first time, and you think these people are like professionals and they're here doing it. Like, how can I, like a med student, like I've only been on the wards for like a few months, like how can I do it? And it's just having that confidence to just go in there. And obviously, as long as you have the right people around you, I had the right people around me when I did my world records. I had my friends, I had people that cared about me, like cheering on for me. And in med, like when I go onto the ward, I'll have the right doctors there to make sure that I do things safely. And as long as you know have the right people around you and you believe in yourself enough, you should just like just go for things. And I think that's really helped me out a lot. And I think the second big thing is just resilience. Like having to do some of those erg tests twice, and like you said, just kind of just like fully just committing and going for it, and knowing that you like things are gonna be things are gonna be fine. When the worst comes to worst is you fail. And like I think it taught me that like in fact failure can be like a fuel, and rather than something to be necessarily afraid of. And especially like for me, when I didn't hit my targets, for me I almost saw that as like a fail. That is it, that's kind of the end of the road. Whereas now I've kind of learned like no, it's like all like a big learning curve, and just a lesson that I can take something away from. And just because I don't achieve something doesn't mean I'm not capable of achieving it. There's just so many other things that play into it. And especially with my mindset, like I said, like, when you're going into it with like a very stressful mindset, like I need to achieve this, I have to do this, putting so much pressure on yourself, it's so difficult to perform. Whereas when you did your 2K just like on the whim after like having done a full session, or when I like went and did my like world record attempt for the second day in a row after having just done this, it just shows you that you can do it. And one of my favorite quotes is I don't know who's it by. I think I saw it on some like TikTok once, but it's if your mind can handle it, your body will do it. And I think for me, just taught me that so many of the like limits I place on myself are just in my head and aren't actually real. And it's just taught me to just kind of, keep pushing, whether it's like in my studies or like try new skills on the board, and just realizing that, as long as I'm confident and I'm safe in the way that I do these things, um, there's no harm in just giving it a shot. And if I fail, I fail, and I'll try again, and might succeed the next time.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. Those are some great takeaways from it. For the remainder of your season, so I saw that I gotta shout out this YouTube page that I've seen. It's a rowing YouTube. It's like rowing in slow motion.
Oh yeah.
They get like just videos of people rowing in slow motion, I guess. But it showed your boat club at the May bumps, I guess.
Yeah.
What was the racing season like for you this year?
Yeah, so it was so like Maybell's definitely I'd say kind of like the highlight in the last few months. So our boat club, especially on the women's side and the men's side too, but the women's side we've got a long standing history of being quite high up in the ranking. So we started off ranked fifth this season, and we bumped up to fourth, which is pretty huge for us. I think mainly because kind of at that point the margins like in the top kind of I'd say in the top like 7 or 8 boats, the margins are just so tight, because you're really like you have to be a whole length and a half faster than someone in order to bump them. So yeah, we went up by 1 place over 4 days, which is pretty good. One of the days was quite disappointing for us. I think we could have gone up more, but 2 boats bumped out in front of us, and the clearing didn't happen correctly, so we had to just stop mid race. And if you stop, you kind of get a technical row over, which basically means that you don't move up or down, you just stay where you are. So you kind of almost like miss out on a day. But it was just so much fun. It was a great crew. And I had a lot of fun. And this was my first May bumps in with the first boat. I didn't quite make it in my kind of first year of rowing. So it was very exciting. It was my first kind of year doing it in like with the first women's boat in the Maze bumps. So it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
And so, what does rowing look like for you in the future?
I definitely want to, I think, give trialing another shot at some point. potentially in my final year of medical school where things are a bit more like, yes, it's my final year, but in terms of placement, I think it's a little bit more manageable. So, I think it would be incredible to have the opportunity to do the Cambridge Oxford boat race and fully like have a shot at that. But in the meantime, I think I'm just going to carry on. I'm going to give a few more records a stab on the RP3. I think I've basically now have a whole year to just kind of train on the erg. It's going to be quite an intense year academically. Fifth year is usually quite difficult in med school, so there's going to be a great like stress relief and something to look forward to. And I also want to compete at the World Indoor Rowing Champs. I think that are coming up at the end of this year, and then there's some at the start of next year too. So yeah, might transition over to a concept too. Yeah, and give that a go. But yeah, I think indoor rowing for the next year, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, if things work out, another shot at the Cambridge Oxford boat race team.
Very sweet, very sweet. Any advice that you would give to a younger rower? Doesn't even have to be necessarily a rower. If a student is watching this, what advice would you give to them?
I think kind of an overarching piece of advice and something that I think has been quite prominent in my kind of life so far is just give things a go. Because if you don't try, you'll never know. And same with anything, if you don't try a sport, you won't know if you like it. Like I didn't really give rowing a proper shot. I just kind of had my assumptions about it, mainly because all my friends were doing it. Whereas it turned out to be like the best sport I think I've done. Like for me, definitely, it was just such a good fit, and I like loved it so much, and I just wish that I like discovered it sooner. And same with I also never thought, honestly, that I'd end up studying medicine at Cambridge. Like I knew that I worked hard and I knew that I did well at school, but I just didn't think I had what it takes to end up being here. And the only thing that was the difference between me ending up here and not is the fact that one day I said, okay, well, I'll check the box for Cambridge in my application and see what happens. And it's about just giving things a shot. Even if you don't think that those things are possible, you don't know. Never be the one to tell yourself no, let someone else say no to you, because at that point you know that you've done everything you can to try.
Thank you for that enlightening, response there. I really appreciate your time. Do you want to give any shout outs? You want to shout out your friends? You want to shout out anything? This is your time for it. And I appreciate your time in all honesty. And it's great to hear your story. And we hope to continue to follow your story. And hopefully we'll have you on again so we could be like, okay, well, this is like your last year med school. How's it going? Maybe, we'll keep keep everybody updated with your story. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, let's do that. That'll be fun. Yeah, I guess my shout outs would be to my friends Izzy and Gorak, who were the first people to like fully try to teach me how to row. My boat club, I'm a boat club, Cambridge University Boat Club, all my coaches, all my friends, all my teammates, and everyone who's just supported me along the way, because this isn't a one person job. This is it takes many people to achieve these things, and I'm just so grateful that I've been so privileged to have such amazing and supportive people around me, that I've been able to achieve everything I have. Like I could not have done this on my own.
Sensational. Thank you very much. Everybody, make sure you follow her. What's your Instagram?
It's okeke.chinazo. So my last name dot my first name. okeke.chinazo.
Chinazo, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much. It was lovely speaking to you.